Hello and welcome back to KXAN Plus. I'm your host, Esmeralda Zamora, and today we have our Nick's First Warning weather segment with Chief Meteorologist Nick Bannin. Nick, thanks for joining me. How you doing?
Esme, good to see you again as we cruise along through this October. We're going to start looking at November already. Is it too soon?
I think it is way too soon. We're not even done with October yet.
All right, so you want to look at November like November 1st and not any time earlier than that?
Yes, or maybe October 31st.
Okay, so Halloween, you expect everyone to start focusing on the weather for November and not Halloween?
And maybe after they've gotten all their candies,
Okay.
they sit down, get ready for bed, and then they watch our video about November.
Okay, so we'll postpone this chat until Halloween night at about 9:30 when everyone's hopped up on Halloween candy. That's what you want to do.
Yeah, and better idea, we both wear costumes for this.
All right, it's a plan. We'll do it.
Well, today we are still talking about our November outlook, and It looks like our little banner that says what to expect as fall wraps up, but I feel we're not even in fall yet.
I know. Well, technically we are. I know we've only had a few cooler mornings and not very many cooler afternoons, but there's some signs of change ahead here. Last couple weeks of October, I think, are going to feel more appropriately fall-like. But November is the final month of meteorological fall. So even if it doesn't feel like it's really started, we're already
Not in
talking
Texas.
about its end. I know, right? Although the Panhandle, they've, of course, had their much cooler air that they typically get way before we do. So not the whole state of Texas feeling quite as hot as we have, but certainly much of the state has been warmer than normal so far.
Well, what can we expect for this coming month?
All right, so let me give you the preliminary outlook then for the month of November from the Climate Prediction Center. Now, for those of you new to this video podcast that we do when we cover these outlooks, they come out twice. There's the mid-month one that comes out about a couple of weeks before the new month begins. And then there's the one that comes out the day before the new month begins.
October 31st.
October 31st, right. So we will get an update, sort of final look at November on the final day of October. So this is the preliminary outlook for November. And here's what the Climate Prediction Center from NOAA are thinking so far. They're leaning toward near normal rain for the month of October for just about all of central Texas. But as you get west of the hill country, you start entering an area of drier than normal. There's also going to be another area of drier than normal well to the east of us and into, say, eastern portions of Louisiana. So for us, we are squarely in that near normal, which is not ideal given how little rain we had all of September and the first couple of weeks at least of October. So we really need these months to start having a forecast and then eventually a reality of wetter than normal, because we got to start playing catch up on our lack of rain. And I know we had so much rain and, of course, devastating and historic rainfall amounts in parts of the area early January, but we really haven't had a whole lot since then. And so we've been seeing this drought developing very quickly and spreading through the area. So near normal for rainfall for November would not be ideal.
What is near normal, or what even is normal for rainfall in November for us here in Texas?
Yeah, let me jump to those normals just to give you a preview of what normal is. So we'll talk about the rainfall first, and then I'll give you the outlook for temperatures for the month of November. It is usually, from a rain perspective, we average under 3 inches of rain. This puts it in the middle there as far as wet or dry months go, the 6th wettest month of the year here in Central Texas, which is nothing super remarkable. So it's not that wet of a month. It's not our driest month of the year. It's sort of in the middle. But then from a temperature perspective, there is almost no doubt about it. It does look to be a warmer than normal month. And the darker shades here just indicating the increasing likelihood of it being warmer than normal. This is not saying it will be even hotter because of the darker shades, although it can sometimes mean that. It just means the odds are even more in our favor of it being warmer than normal for the month of November. So you get on the outskirts here, and I'll try and adjust my map so that I can...
And temperature-wise, what are we thinking, like 90s, like we're seeing right now?
Yeah, so I'll point out what is normal here first, and then we can dive into what we usually see as far as temperatures in November. So just back to the shading, though, these lighter shades indicate slight odds toward it being warmer than normal. Slightly darker shades indicating, okay, pretty good odds of being warmer than normal.
Yeah.
And then we're here in those darkest shades that indicate, okay, very likely of being warmer than normal. Nothing quite guaranteed, but, if you're in that darker shade, it's a fairly good bet. But you asked what normal was in November. We average highs in the upper 70s at the beginning of the month and upper 60s by the end of the month. So we do typically see a pretty significant temperature drop through the month of November. We also average lows from the mid 50s at the beginning of the month into the mid 40s by the end of the month. So our nights get cool, our days get cooler. It should start feeling more like fall in November.
Now, when fall is over.
Yeah, well, yes, right. The final month of fall finally feels like fall. Then we get into winter, and then that feels more like fall. But, such is life around here, right? But you said you were wondering, well, what does it mean then if we're going to be warmer than normal? And this is normal, let's say. So warmer than normal, those odds being warmer than normal doesn't give you an indication of how much warmer than normal it's going to be. It just says, hey, the odds are a good bet that you will be quite a bit. The odds are very likely that you would be above normal, but it could be by a little, it could be by a lot. Now, generally speaking, though, I would suggest that if the averages are in the 70s at the beginning of the month, then you're more likely to see the 80s hanging on for longer. If our average lows drop from the 50s to the 40s, we'll probably get some 60s for overnight lows, especially in the beginning of the month as well. And then we'll generally trend those numbers down toward the end of the month. So, that's just generally speaking, that's what warmer than average would be if we're looking at November, is that some 80s may hang on into the month. And you can get 90s in November. They're just way less common than in October, and we've certainly had plenty of them this October.
Nick, when it goes into planning these outlooks, I know we've talked about it in the past, but for those viewers that are here, that are new, what goes into planning or figuring out what the outlook is going to look for in November?
Yeah, so it's the Climate Prediction Center and NOAA that do this. They are experts in long-term forecasting. Here at KXAN, we're more of the near-term, short-term meteorologists and forecasters. We're looking at hours and days ahead, and then we put together a 7-day forecast. And then you have climatologists at NOAA and the National Weather Service that are experts in looking weeks and months ahead of time. So they'll be looking at various different weather patterns that look like they're trying to set up as we head into either the next month or the next season, and they'll project what those weather patterns would do from a temperature perspective, as well as a rainfall or, in some cases, snow perspective. And what's going to play a big role is this map here. It's La Nina, which is now started, which means cooler than average temperatures are present in a certain area of the eastern equatorial Pacific.
Not here where we are.
No, but it's the water temperatures that determine whether you're in a La Nina or an El Nino or an ENSO neutral, as well as whether the atmosphere is responding to those water temperatures or not. So this is the pattern that often sets up as we head into the cooler months when you have a La Nina. Now, this is the typical pattern for a La Nina winter, but we can also start to see the La Nina trends and patterns beginning later in the fall months as well, but they're most commonly tied to the winter. But that would mean drier than normal and warmer than normal here in many of the southern states, including us here in Texas. And we've already seen a little bit of that, certainly in September, and much of October started that way. So we're already starting to see some signs of the winter La Nina pattern beginning a bit early now that we're into late fall, and seeing a taste of that lack of rainfall and the persistence of the heat. So these are the sort of things that the climatologists, when they're looking at, okay, how are we going to figure out what's going to happen next month or the next 3 months? These are the types of things they'll look at. Oh, is La Nina going to be likely going on? Oh, okay, well, that typically means this. Are there other things at play that could impact what is a typical La Nina pattern? Or is La Nina going to be the dominant factor going into November or the winter time? And they'll use that. They'll also use some of the short-term computer modeling forecasting that we use, especially at the beginning of the November forecast. They may be able to use some of those more accurate short-term models to get a sense of, okay, if the first week of November is super wet and cold, then you can certainly take that to mean that, okay, if you got a lot of rain at the beginning of November, even if it dried out the rest of November, your chances of having a wet November are pretty high.
Yeah.
So they may use some of that, especially when they release their final outlook at the end of October. Their short-term models will be able to see that first week, 7 to even 14 days into November. And then they'll be leaning on those longer-term computer models as well as the pattern recognition to figure out what's going to happen for the rest of the month and for the rest of the season too.
So we know we have a kind of an idea of what the pattern is going to be for the beginning of November.
Yeah.
When that second outlook comes out, what should we expect to see? A more precise outlook?
Yeah, there's certainly usually an improvement. Their forecast for their monthly outlook that comes out the day before the month begins, as opposed to 2 weeks ahead of time. Mm-hmm. Because they've got more time to look at data, those higher resolution computer models that can see for the next week or two start to take you deeper into the month of November. So they're usually more accurate. I can't predict now what the outlook will be the day before November, because we'll have to see what they're seeing and what we're seeing at that point.
The patterns, right?
Exactly. Because if I could predict now what their next outlook would be, then they would have just made their next outlook this outlook. and there would be no point in refreshing the outlook and coming up with an update. But they do this, National Weather Service and NOAA, with a lot of things. They'll have a preliminary hurricane seasonal outlook, and then they'll update it again. So it's not a one-off that they do this preliminary version and then a final version just before that month or that season begins. It's what they do. And one other thing that they'll have to look at too is the tropics.
Hurricane season's not over yet.
No, it doesn't end until the end of November. So November is our final month of Atlantic hurricane season. And typically in a La Nina hurricane season in the Atlantic, you get more hurricanes.
Towards the end?
Well, so yes, because La Nina is more of a late fall winter thing. Mm-hmm. Now, if you have La Nina conditions continuing into the summer, then you can still get some of those impacts too. But this particular year, we're seeing La Nina ramping up toward the end of the season. So it's the end of the season that would be impacted most by La Nina. And that typically does result in more hurricanes. There's less wind shear, more of a conducive environment for tropical activity in the Atlantic during La Nina conditions, which we have now seen officially return now. So this is part of that outlook too. Not so much for us here in Texas, but they'll be watching the
coastal areas.
Increased expectations, for more storms to continue potentially a little later into the season before the water temperatures cool off enough that the season comes to an end and then we go quiet again until next spring.
Well, Nick, it looks like we were pretty quiet for quite a while, but what are we looking at now as far as tropics?
Yeah, we've caught up in a big way. Just in the last few weeks, we've seen a number of storms. We're now through at least the M-named storms, depending on the time our viewers are watching this. But Melissa formed on the 21st of October, and that was our 13th named storm of the season. The next names up, should they warrant names, it would be Nestor, and then Olga, and then Pablo, Rebecca, Sebastian, Tanya, Van, and Wendy. So those are the next names on the list. Still a few
left on the list,
but
not too many.
named on the list, that's for sure. And a reminder of the forecast for the Atlantic hurricane season from NOAA was for 13 to 18 named storms, and we now have hit that 13. So for those that may say, I thought it was supposed to be a busy season, and it wasn't.
It was.
Well, now we've hit that 13 mark, so we're within the range of their forecast.
Yeah.
Now, we haven't had as many hurricanes as they were expecting, but the season's not over. They were expecting 5 to 9, and so far through October 21st, there have been 4. But we've already hit their forecast for the number of major hurricanes, which they were expecting between 2 and 5, and we've had 3 already. It just so happens that while we haven't had a lot of hurricanes so far, those that have developed, most of them have become major hurricanes, categories 3 or higher. So forecast so far looks like it is going to, for the most part, be turning out pretty well, although maybe on the lower end of their range, but still within range by the time we wrap up November, I I would imagine, based on some of the things we've seen.
But also, we always know that things are changing and things can happen pretty quickly. So we still have the rest of November to see how that goes for us, right?
Yeah, for sure. Although climatologically speaking, typically November, we do see a pretty big drop. I can throw this map up here. This is the average number of storms that we see during each month of the year, with a typical peak coming on September 10th. Ignore that today bar, because depending on when you're watching it, today's either in the middle of October, end of October. But you can see what happens once we get to November 1st is that there is typically much less activity than what we have in the month of September. Now, this year may be different, of course. We could have certainly not as much as September necessarily, but more than a typical November because of the La Nina conditions and the fairly warm waters in some parts of the Atlantic. But the general idea is that we're running out of time for additional storms once you get into November, and then the big drop-off continues, and then by December 1st, the Atlantic hurricane season is over.
And we start our winter season here in Texas.
Which we can get on to in a bit. While we've got some time, though, I do want to dig into how the temperatures change here through the fall season. You want to do that?
What is fall for us? Because it's clearly not what I think it is.
It's just on the calendar, and then we say it's fall, and then we have our pumpkin spice, and then we
go to the pumpkin patch and
stuff. Yeah,
do fall things.
That's all fall is, I guess, down here. But here's our average fall temperatures in Austin for the month as a whole. So September, 91. Yeah, right? Doesn't feel like fall when it's the 90s. October, 83, and we've been first couple of weeks of October, first 3 weeks, in fact, have been well above normal. But then November, our average high drops to 72 when you factor in the whole month. Rainfall-wise, October is supposed to be our second wettest month of the year.
Almost 4 inches that we did not see.
Yes. I mean, there's some hope here and there to get it in the last week and a half of the month. But then by November, things turn much drier as we head into the final month of fall. It sets us up well for winter, which is our driest season of the year. So the rain cuts off, not completely, but
for a while.
Certainly more so as we enter the cooler months as we get into November. One of the things that we also start to talk about as we head into November is our first freeze.
And when is that going to start for us?
So it depends where you are. Some parts of the hill country actually average their first freeze between October 31st and November 6th.
And why is that they get to start first before
So they're
us?
a little higher up. You and I have talked about elevation and
in the hill
what it
country.
does to temperatures before. But yes, being higher up certainly helps with that. And then especially on those nights where you've got clear skies, light wind, dry ground, and plus you get the benefits of elevation, then you typically see those temperatures cooling off more quickly. The heat from the day radiating out nicely and then dropping us down to near freezing. So that's why the Western Hill Country sees those first freezing
early
nights
November.
Earlier.
Yeah.
And then you'll find as you get a little lower in elevation, the first freeze comes a little bit later and later. So
closer to December.
Yeah, well, November 7th through the 13th for the majority of the rest of the hill country. And then you get into, say, areas near and west of 35 that I didn't already mention. And then, yes, that's usually on the back half of November. And then east of 35 for eastern counties, that's usually late November. But then, interestingly, Austin sort of sticks out as being the latest, and that's because of the urban heat island effect. We have so much asphalt and concrete in Austin that retains heat during the day that it takes a while before that heat that is built up and stored in those types of surfaces can cool off at night to allow you to get down to freezing. So that's why around urban areas like in Austin, and you'll also notice at the bottom of your screen here, if you can see it near my arrow there, right around San Antonio does the same thing. And you would find the same in Dallas too, a much
big
later.
City, yeah.
Yeah, it's the big city impacts there. But you get out of the city into the suburbs of Austin, Round Rock, Pflugerville, Georgetown, and then you'll start seeing those freezes coming earlier, and certainly that's the case as you get into more of Hayes County, Western Williamson, and Travis counties, and into the hill country. And then in our eastern counties, they typically hold on to the humidity and the higher moisture content from the Gulf a little bit longer, which helps to keep our nighttime temperatures warmer. So that's why their first freeze is later. So while we look at freezes, you can see how the average number of freezes in Austin changes through the end of the year, through the winter, and then into early next spring. So we do average one freeze in the month of November. That's between 1991 and 2020. That's where we get that one.
And was that freeze like towards the end of November, or those
So it's
freezes?
not just the one freeze, it's the average
Multiple.
of those freezes. So, and that's an average of a date. So the date will have shifted around necessarily, but we average, and by averaging one, it can mean 0.7 that rounds up to one, so not every November freezes, but during that 30-year period, we have averaged one freeze in the month of November. Even if our average first freeze is around December 1st, you can still work the averages such that November may average one. But then we see a bigger increase in December with 3. January has our most freezes of the year with 5, and then we still get 2 in February, and then down to 1 in March. February is one of our warmest, our fastest warming months from the beginning to the end as we start to enter spring, pick up the humidity a little bit more. So while the beginning of February can be particularly cold, we'll typically find that by the end of February, temperatures are much more reasonable, and we start to lose our concerns for winter, and our final average freeze of the year in Austin usually happens around the middle of February. So I did want to dabble into the freezes a little bit because November does average one freeze in Austin, and we average our first freeze in many places west of 35, especially in the month of November. So it is a month that people can look forward to that first freeze. Now, first freeze doesn't mean you have to protect your pipes. You don't have to protect your pipes for every freeze.
It's not that cold.
Yeah, you got to have those deeper freezes to start causing pipe problems. Most of the infrastructure here in Central Texas is fine when you get into 30 to 32 with a light freeze. It's when you start getting in the 20s.
When you've got to get worried.
There. Yeah, and then you start dripping the pipes a little bit, do some of the protective measures. So a freeze shouldn't scare you necessarily, but you should be ready to do some of those protective measures if we start talking about a deeper, longer lasting freeze, which we're not talking about for any time soon.
So we don't got to protect those plants. We don't have to protect the pipes quite yet. But once we get into December, we might start talking about that.
Yeah, and even you could get a frost with temperatures slightly above freezing. So you can get a frost before you get a freeze, and you do protect your plants for a frost. So you worry about your plants before you worry about your pipes, because they are less tolerant to temperatures, say, between about 32 to 35, and of course colder than that. That's why you have us, though. We'll tell you. People, pets, plants, and pipes. The 4 Ps. One of the first things I learned when I got here.
Those are my favorite things to hear when we hit that winter time here in Texas, because I just know there's a chance for a little flurry here and there.
You never know. Well, we did have that snow last January into February, which...
we had it for February,
I got about an inch
pretty frequently, Yeah,
it was good.
It's pretty cold.
February only averages 0.2 of an inch of snow, though, in Austin. So it doesn't snow every February, but sometimes we get lucky.
Or sometimes we get snowed in for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, there's that extreme, too. Lastly, I want to talk about the length of our days that continues to change. So in the month of October, we've lost... and we'll lose by the end of the month about 50 minutes of daylight in Austin. The rate with which we lose light in November starts to slow. So in, say, mid-October, we were losing about 1 minute, 45 seconds of daylight per day. But that rate of daylight loss per day starts to slow in November, and then we end up losing about 30, 35 minutes of daylight in the month of November. And then in December, we don't lose very much, but we're losing just a little bit leading up to the darkest day of the year, or the shortest day of the year, which is the beginning of winter. And then we will very, very slowly start to gain the time back. So we're not losing daylight at a fast rate in December, but we've lost so much of it by then that we're just losing seconds of it per day to give way to our shortest days of the year. But I did want to sort of give you that preview that as we head into November, we're going to be losing about 30, 35 minutes of daylight by the end of the month, from the beginning to the end. So it's only going to get darker. And of course, daylight saving time ends the first weekend in November. So we've got that to look forward to too. That means more light in the morning, but much darker evenings.
And that means that we are going backwards, right? Not forward?
Yeah, so we fall back and then spring forward in the spring. So that's how you remember it. I had some people I used to work with at a different station. They would purposefully mess with you. They're like, I fall forward and I spring back. I was like, wait, no. Which one is it? Who's springing backward? But anyway, so that's something that we've already talked about a little bit. But this should cover the outlook for November. And you can go onto KXAN.com under the weather blog section. We've got that November forecast and what to expect. We'll be adding this video to that story too, in case you want to rewatch it.
And those are the graphics.
And continue to watch it.
And just keep it on your TV all day long.
Yeah, do all the things. I've even thrown in some of the drought information that was most recently updated that we didn't get to in our discussion today. That's on KXAN.com as well. So, because we have seen a pretty significant deterioration in the drought, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, before we wrap, I did want to ask you about the rain chances for this weekend.
Okay.
What are we looking at?
So rain chances right now start to pick up on Friday. And wrong graphic.
And again, if you're rewatching this video, this might have already happened, but we do want to talk about it
Yeah,
today.
So the rain chances jump up in a big way on Friday. Now, this rain chance of about 80% on Friday includes Friday night. So I think during the day, our rain chances are closer to about 40 or 50% until the sun sets. And then the rain chances go higher in the evening and night. So I'm thinking a lot of the day on Friday won't be that wet, but the evening and night will be getting wetter. And then some of that rain continues into Saturday, mostly Saturday morning. So the highest rain chances Saturday come the first half of the day, which is unlike Friday, where the highest rain chances come during the second half of the day. And then we dry out for the most part Sunday and Monday before minimal rain chances here come on Tuesday. Meteorologist Freddie Vela is going to be watching the rain expectations at 4 o'clock today. And I've got you covered at 5 and 6. We'll dive into it.
And hopefully, fingers crossed, this helps us get back to that more of a wet month of October.
I know.
That we should
could play some catch up here at the end of this month here with some potential, at least, for more frequent rain and at least some cooler temperatures.
Yeah. Well, again, if you are interested in reading that article that Nick has written up, it's on our website, KXAN.com. You can find it on the homepage. Nick, for anyone that wants to watch our Nick's First Warning weather from this week, last week, 2 weeks ago, where can they do that?
KXAN Plus. Download that app for your smart TV. That means Apple TV, Fire Stick, Roku, Samsung TV. I think I've got them all. I think there's 4. That's how I remember it. There's 4. But it's great. We've been adding some various live streams. We even have a weather stream from 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. That can give you a look at the forecast there in between newscasts if you'd like, or some looks outside too if you like to. So we've been dabbling and experimenting, and it's a cool way to see all sorts of content. But we've got you covered weather-wise there and newscast-wise as well.
Yeah, and it's completely free, so please download that on your app store. Yes. Nick, thank you for joining me and giving us all this information, and we're excited to hear what you have for us next week.
Thanks for having me.
See you soon.
See ya.